Let me start at the very beginning, the universe. But I want to start with the obvious that most people forget, that I am here today, like all of you and like everyone else is here, because we're standing on top of this gigantic rock that we call planet Earth, moving through space in a universe that we only know 5% of. And because of that, we sometimes ask ourselves, what is the meaning of all this? So let me take you on a journey where I try to find meaning. And I'm going to try to come back to the very beginning. This is a mountain called Pico that in my hometown everyone has a special relationship with. We look at it every day because we want to try to predict the weather. If there's too many clouds, it might rain. If there isn't, it won't rain. But we also look at it for inspiration. And when I was young, I started looking at this, and I had an experience. I thought, you know, what created this mountain, and what created this mountain, and what created this mountain. It's sort of the first experience of the notion of infinity, and that put me on a path to try to find meaning by trying to understand the universe. So I started studying to become a theoretical physicist, more precisely what we call the string theorist, which is someone, for those who don't know, tries to understand everything that's very small to everything that is very big, and has a very simple worldview that everything in the universe is made out of little tiny wiggling strings. So at some point later on, I became a PhD student, young and stylish, and I was writing equations all day on the blackboard, trying to understand the mysteries of black holes and extra dimensions, and writing incomprehensible papers about what that could be. Now, I soon realized that in my field, it's very difficult for ideas to make any impact, both in science and in society, precisely because they're very crazy ideas and they might not be right. You don't know. In fact, if you go back in the history of physics, you will realize that many ideas took 20, 30, 40, 50 years or more to have any impact in society and in science itself. So I was at sort of a kind of crossroads that I didn't know what the purpose and the meaning of what I was doing was. And besides that, my field is rather old-fashioned, that the only way to make a contribution is precisely to write those equations. So I went back home and I gathered with a bunch of friends, especially one of them who was an artist and a sailor, and together with another friend who inspired me very much, we decided to go into a 70-year-old sailboat, and sail across from the Azores to Morocco. And that took 26 days, and during that time I sort of had a brain reset, because I only thought about the ocean and the universe and the stars, and I couldn't sleep because I was really scared the boat was going to sink. So I did all the night shifts while everyone was sleeping because I wanted to make sure the boat wouldn't sink. And when I arrived to Morocco, I had to go back to Copenhagen because it took very long, and I still had to write more equations on the blackboard. But when I got there, my flatmate that you can see there, he told me, hey, my dream is to open a cocktail bar and art gallery, but I lost my investor. And I don't know what happened in my mind, but I said, hey, let's do it together. So then by the end of my first year of PhD, I had two types of jobs. I was writing equations during the day, and I was washing glasses during the evening, and trying to organize all sorts of events, music, concerts, book releases, photo exhibitions, everything you can think of. But somehow that gave me a lot of meaning, even though it was hard work, because all of a sudden I had a lot of interactions with many other people who were not academics, many people who were artists, musicians, and creatives. And I came across an idea that was being pushed by a group of people that education and entertainment should come closer together. And indeed I thought, you know, there's all this culture in this bar of music, concerts, etc. Why isn't knowledge and education part of that culture? Why isn't science part of nightlife? So what I did was to create a series of events called Science in Cocktails, in which I would invite scientists to discuss cutting-edge science at this bar and act as a catalyst for interactions between science and society. And here you can see one of the so-called fathers of string theory giving that first lecture. Now, this bar and this setting had a problem. Running a bar also means you have to make profit, and I really hated that, to the point that at some point I was in the supermarket and I tried to steal some apples because I wanted to save some money. So I was really very focused on money, and that didn't really go so well. So we decided to close this bar, and I moved to a place called Christiania, which is a semi-autonomous neighborhood in the heart of Copenhagen, known for its space for creativity and self-organization. And I moved to this collective, which is this very big building with a lot of different people in it, from carpenters to artists to musicians to welders. And I acquired there an extended family, but most importantly, I also had the opportunity to running cinema that was in the ground floor, that I could develop all sorts of grassroots initiatives. And I acquired loads of friends, loads of different interactions, and I learned how to do art installations. I also learned how to design sound using physics and maths, and created some band with one of my best friends. And I met a really strange group of people who would do anything in the world in the name of science, including all sorts of weird performances. So at the end of that, I brought everyone together, all my friends, all these interactions, the science, the digital art, everything, and started creating this series of events, the Science in Cocktail series, with all those elements in it. And that was really great. It gave me a lot of purpose, because all of a sudden there was a very interesting platform for these interactions between science and society to take place. And that was also due to the fact that there was an enormous culture of volunteers that put a lot of effort on trying to make that work. At that point, people were flying in, scientists were flying in from all sorts of places to give lectures there. Nobel Prize winners were drinking their cocktails in a hippie commune occasionally, and I had to drive them back home in cargo bikes because they were not too good, too fit to walk by themselves. But still, the numbers started growing, and the event went from 40 people per event to 600 to 800 to 1,000 to 1,300, and maybe one day it will occupy a whole stadium. Now, the fact that this happened also changed my worldview about science and about how I should do science. One time I invited a neuroscientist to speak at one of these events, and I got very inspired by her because she had written a book of interviews to different neuroscientists about their views on consciousness. And I thought, well, this is a really good idea, and maybe I should try to do something similar in my own field. So I started couch surfing around the world, as you can see there in different locations, interviewing different scientists about their views on space, time, the universe. And in the very beginning, I interviewed a Nobel Prize winner who told me, at the end of the interview, he told me this: you know, you might be a nice guy, and this book might be good for students, for the public, for the community, but what matters in the end is the papers you publish. So this goes back to the same sort of old-fashioned point of view of my field that I explained in the beginning, but that didn't put me down. I continued, and for 10 years I interviewed all these people, and I created this book, Conversations on Quantum Gravity, with that collection of interviews, and that includes a lot of knowledge and information that you wouldn't get in papers, because it is speculative. People discuss their speculative ideas about their work, they discuss the meaning of their work, they discuss what they think about the other people's work, and you can find there 1,000 different projects that would give humanity at least 100 years of research, if you would like. Now, I find this an interesting example because my field is very traditional, but all of a sudden there was a new methodology that could be used to find some information. And somehow, if I have to give a name to that methodology, it's journalism. So somehow there's value in combining those things, in bringing a different field into my own. Now, I sat down at these Science in Cocktails lectures for a very long time, and I was exposed to many different types of sciences, including many different types of physics. And then I soon realized that the whole of science is really fragmented into pieces, even not just into different sciences, but also each science into its fragmented into different disciplines. In my own field, you can find, you enter in any department of physics and you find a corner for the string theorists, a corner for the particle physicists, a corner for the quantum matter experimentalists, a corner for the astrophysicists. There's a corner for everybody. And I thought, how is this possible? I had helped creating a kind of event that gave me a lot of meaning in bringing science and culture and art, everything together. How could it be that my own field was so fragmented? Couldn't we do something better? And at that point, my interests exploded, and I was not just thinking about the universe, I was thinking about all the types of matter that you can see here. Superconductors, and superfluids, and plasmas, and pretty much everything that is the domain of physics. And then you can ask the question, is there actually principles or knowledge that is necessary to understand all these things together? Because each of these things is its own separate field, but maybe there's principles across all these fields. And there is. One of them is called emergence. It's the idea that many things come out of the result of the interactions of many small things. So this is the collective phenomena of matter. Things are stiff, things are wet, because of the interactions of small particles, electrons, gas molecules, anything you can come up with. And so I was very excited about the possibility of exploring things across sciences, but there was no platform for it. So I had to think about what that could be, and guided by a group of people here in the Netherlands, I took the role of coordinating the Dutch Institute for Emergent Phenomena, whose purpose was precisely to bring together all fields of physics, including mathematical physics, philosophy of physics, chemical physics, into some kind of collaborative institute that would give you the freedom, the space and the intellectual freedom to really go across these subdisciplines. But now you can think that this is a bit of a slippery slope, because if you sit down like I did for 14 years at these lectures, I was exposed also to all sorts of sciences. And here just an example of some of those sciences. And you start thinking, why is science itself fragmented, not just each subfield? And is there mechanisms that are actually across these sciences? Is there universal explanations across these sciences? And I think there's many. And this is just an example. You can think about the collection of electrons and collection of particles in the same way you can think about the collection of fish, the collection of birds, the collection of bacteria, and even the collection of people. There's all these principles out there that have to be explored and should be explored for a more holistic and synergistic understanding of phenomena in nature. So if I go back to this picture here, with all these things, I now want to integrate, and I've did in some way, in this institute, trying to reach out to all these sciences and make this network of people and collaborations that will allow people to have this freedom of exploration. And right now, I don't see these things as they're separate things. I just see them as one single thing, one science, which is called science. And I myself, I don't see myself any longer as a physicist, but as a scientist. So I think there's a lot of value in trying to explore the interdisciplinarity and the interconnections between science, society, culture, and art. And I think I've made a little bit my role in trying to create that sort of platform for the next generations to be able to continue and explore these universal principles and also their connections with society. So if there's some experience that is worth exploring, in my personal opinion, is the fact that the traditional approach to science should be abandoned. We should take a more modern approach to science, in which we include sort of the feedback between science, society, and in all disciplines. Thank you.